University Lecture continues as Mrs. Dawn Westlake of the Institute for Educational Research in Chicago speaks on the topic, Sex Education in the High School.
I think when we think of the current curriculum of the high school, and especially when we think of the curriculum of the secondary school, the schools in general, but the secondary school in particular, we find that this is a very crowded curriculum. We feel that our students need foreign language and English and mathematics and science and history and economics and physical education, to name a few of the currently prescribed prerogatives. On the other hand, our periodicals, our current periodicals, decry the fact that we have family breakdown as evidenced by divorce, desertion, marital problems, and that individual disintegration is evidenced by more than 5 million people who suffer from alcohol problems. And also we have no indication of the number of people who escape through drug addiction. We read about all of these kinds of things in the papers, and then we think of the many personality problems, and we have directors of personnel who tell us that during good times, 70% of the people who are dismissed for personality reasons rather than that they are incompetent to do their job technically. Our youth are concerned over their own sexuality, and because of their concern, they become pawns of Madison Avenue through advertising that is done related to their growth and to the place where they are in their life cycle. I think that we also find ourselves concerned with venereal disease, illegitimate pregnancies, school dropouts, to name a few of the things that seem to be of concern to us at this time. Perhaps our emphasis in our school curriculum is not relevant. Perhaps the emphasis on the kinds of things that we say are necessary for graduation is misplaced. Possibly the term relevance has been so popularized recently by our college and high school students in their concerns for the daily problems that they meet, and in how these concerns are meant as they go through their school curriculum. Possibly our educational prerogatives are misplaced, as in the story of the young bride who was being married. And she was so interested in having the very best wedding possible. She wanted every single detail of her marriage to be perfect. And so she said to her mother, "Mother, will you see to it that every single insignificant detail is there?" And her mother says, "Oh, yes, dear, I'll see that John is there." I think sometimes the emphasis in our school curriculum is misplaced as the emphasis in this family. Students today have the benefit of many more things than in the past. They have the benefit of much more affluence, of better teaching methods, of education, television from age 0. They are exposed to things that we didn't dream about, even those of you who are younger than I am. And yet, I think that one of the things that we have done is to give them excellence in one place and no direction in others. In other words, I think perhaps we have a fragmented excellence. One of the things that is of concern, I think, is that a relevant curriculum in family life and sex education should seek to bring the principles of biology, of sociology, of physiology, of anthropology, of religion, philosophy, and the best possible educational theory to focus on the individual. And many times, the thing that happens is that the student says, well, this is a concept in biology. This is a sociological concept. This is a psychological concept. And I can name it, I can list it, I can match the terms with the definition of those terms. I can see this process, but we don't take the next step in education, which focuses these processes and these theories on the individual and how it influences and is a part of his life and his life cycle and his life associations and relationships. And this, then, is what makes it relevant to the student. And so if there were a relevant curriculum in family life and sex education, it would bring together these various disciplines and focus them on the individual. When we think about young people, I think we need to realize that they need an opportunity to have a place where they can discuss their main concerns. First, youth needs the opportunity to internalize knowledge related to his own sexuality through discussions with his peers, because the peers are the strong identities when one is an adolescent. And youth share sexual information extensively, but the bulk of it is confused or unreliable. We have often heard the question, shall we have family life and sex education? We do have family life and sex education. We have always had it. The question is, where shall we have it? Youth exchange information often, frequently, and in many places. It's always with us. However, the thing I think we need to recognize is that there are also taboo topics which most of us adults fail to realize. Because for the youth, many subjects are too touchy to be discussed at all or are handled only jokingly between close friends. Let me explain what I mean by this. In a boys' locker room, what young man is going to say that he has never had a date with a girl when the talk is girl talk? What young man is going to say that he hasn't had any experiences that the other young boastfuls are boasting about, who also probably haven't had any experiences, but the boast is there? And so the person who has this uncomfortable concern, or it was comfortable, he begins to question. And so, but it's a tabooed kind of thing. There are many things that young people need to know about family life and sex education that are tabooed within their own peer groups. And so they become confused. A group, as in a class then, directed by an understanding adult, offers a protected atmosphere in which the youth can seriously discuss and grapple with these subjects. Each youth must learn to live with these peers, and it is in relation to them that he expresses himself and expresses his own personality in relationships. And it is with them then that he must most realistically learn how to deal with his own sexual being without disclosing his own misunderstandings, his own feelings of insignificance, and his own Achilles heel, if you will. And so that then is his first concern. Now, secondly, we must realize that adolescents are engaged in a struggle to find their own identity or to establish independence from their family. Family life education of the right kind can be a part of both of these quests for youth. It can help the youngster see himself in relationship to where he is in his identity. But it also can give him a place to share the concepts, the misconcepts, and so on without losing himself in that this is really me, if the course is well done. And another sort of thing that he is able to do is to say, in the family, sex at this age is a very private matter. In the peer group, it is a public matter depending upon what is in the peer group. In other words, there are certain kinds of things that we talk about. Certain kinds of things, as I said before, that are tabooed. Now then, if there is a program in family life and sex education, we have supported his chance to be independent, and yet his opportunity and private, and yet his opportunity to get information without confusion. Because our own recognition of who we are, in other words, our sense of sexuality, is a major factor in how we perceive ourselves throughout life. An individual's happiness, his success as a family member, and his civic contribution are either enhanced or diminished by his success or failure in fitting into his sex role and in wisely managing and directing his sexuality. I think this is particularly true for the adolescent. For this reason, it is important that he receive assurance through knowledge and guidance from an objective source outside of his family. A school family life program permits this interchange between the young adult and his instructor. But I should say the exchange between the many young adults and let's hope the several instructors. It's a one-to-one relationship, and then it's a group-to-group relationship. In other words, you have many kinds of interactions going on here. The curriculum in family life and sex education should be planned to provide a direction in the form of value guidance, which is practical enough and idealistic enough to be readily acceptable to modern youth. There should be no insistence upon reciting threadbare platitudes and inapplicable moralizations. Instead, the students should be challenged to focus on the principles, the research, and the validity of those behaviors which tend to strengthen individuals and families, and to learn where he can openly oppose behaviors which tend to weaken individuals and families. In other words, looking at behavior and looking at the decisions that he makes and the choices that he makes, the kinds of relationships that he has in terms of what strengthens an individual and families or what weakens them, and not feeling that there needs to be recite the threadbare platitudes. Also, we need to stop, I think, and be aware of the dictates of time and change. Are we going to present family life and sex education at the most effective time and in scope and depth enough so that it assists youth in decision making? If we are going to enable them to integrate sex into a well-balanced life, then we need to involve youth activity in the design and execution of such programs. I think one of the things that we need to think about when we think of family life and sex education at the secondary level is that what we really have here is a K through 12 program. That we don't learn to read in secondary school. Some of us learn to read before we go to school. Some of us learn in kindergarten and first grade and second grade. And some of us feel that if we haven't learned by a certain grade that we're dunces and this is our biggest a barrier to reading. I think the same kind of thing must be thought about as we identify ourselves as a human being and as a sexual being, and that the family life sex education teaching is a part of all teaching, and that it is a K through 12 sequential learning. Because one of the biggest, I think, arguments against some of the secondary school material is that it was very interesting, it was fine, but it was too late for me. Or perhaps now I am able to reinforce what has happened in the past, put it in perspective, which is not a bad thing to have happen to you, is it? But it would have been so much nicer had I been able to feel comfortable about this, or had I known what the various kinds of opportunities and decisions and so on, where the paths that they led and so on earlier, and had some basic understanding and not have concerned myself so long about this. In our program at Leiden that Dorothea mentioned, we had the students definitely involved in deciding what was relevant in the Family Life program. And they were involved over and over again. However, each year as they were involved, and as different ones were involved, and as they were involved at different levels and so on, there were 8 things that they were felt was most emphatic and important that should be a part of the secondary family life and sex education program. They felt, first of all, and of course this is saying that this should be a continuous kind of thing, they felt it should provide a continuous educational process that would prepare individuals mentally and emotionally for their biological development through to maturity. And this was formulated from students who looked at all of the statements from students who said, you know, we should have had this, there should have been another course for 9th grade and 10th grade, and there should have been a course for junior high and so on. And they came up with this from all the various things, that there should be a continuous sequential thing. They also felt that there's, and they clamored and got a program in adult night school in that same community, that this was something that was necessary as they went out into their adult roles and had additional developmental tasks to work with. Their second thing was to allow and enable each individual to develop a personal standard based on understanding of and concern for others. This comes a personal standard based on understanding of and concern for others. One of the things that we worked with, and that was never ending, was the thinking together about what is a philosophy of life and what is one's personal philosophy of life. The fact that this was an unending kind of thing, but giving them time to think by themselves about what was of greatest value to them. What were goals and what basic philosophies they would want to think through as they worked toward these. Now, the fact that some of these personal philosophies might change is natural and normal and what you would expect. But many times, young people, I think, are in a feeling of quandary and indecision because they haven't had an opportunity to take the time to think through. And there's quite a process to think through what are my attitudes about various things, and to write attitude analyses about things that I think about and how I feel about and where I got these notions. And then what is it that I value? What things did I value in the past that I'm aware of that I have let slough off that is no longer important but was terribly important at a certain age? What things are of grave importance now but will not be of importance in the future? For example, something like high school graduation. That's very important when you're a junior or senior. But soon that is one of the stepping stones, and you have something else that is of uppermost. Then how do I accomplish these particular goals? In other words, what is my value system for accomplishing? And giving students time and opportunity to think about these, to read to philosophers, to read what other people have thought, and then to banter these with each other And what that does, of course, is make the person stronger in what they really do believe and this sort of thing. This they put as one of the most important things at the secondary level. And so it became second to the fact that it needed to be an ongoing K through 12 program. The next thing that they said was to develop, that this course should develop an appreciation of sex as an integral part of life and see it in the perspective of one's whole life. They felt that many times the opportunity to see this in perspective of a life cycle made very much greater sense than to think of it in terms of how they were feeling just now. And the behavior. And the opportunity to put this in its full picture, a picture that is fully developed. They also felt it was important to learn to open up communication and to promote understanding between adults and youth. We did a lot of dialogue, confrontation with adults, dialogue with adults, debates and this sort of thing. And they felt that the adults who had the opportunity to dialogue with them had a greater appreciation of them, and they in turn had a greater appreciation of the adults. And they felt that understanding the processes that on the developmental tasks at each stage of development helped them recognize what might be of concern to one member of the family or another member of the family. And this is where the communication and dialogue would develop. In other words, it would develop in the classroom and then would go home and develop, because they understood what parents and family friends and younger siblings and older siblings and community people were facing as they thought through the various developmental tasks at the various life stages. And so they felt that it opened up communication and promoted understanding. To understand better other patterns of behavior among peers, within the adult generation, and in other cultures, so as to prepare individuals to live with others who believe differently. This idea that there are people who do believe differently, and that in many cases, viva la difference. This is what makes the world interesting and colorful and so on. And that as I study these, I might want to take some of their characteristics and so on. I think when we think of the nose to the grindstone, middle class, vertical rising, and sometimes when we find ourselves on this and have heart attacks at age 40 and so on, sometimes what we have to do is to, or ulcers or whatever else we have to do is to look around and say, you know, I really am not going to solve the world's problems in my lifetime, and perhaps I would be better to solve the problem of the golf ball this afternoon. In other words, I think there's this kind of thing that needs to occur to people. To promote also, they felt, an understanding of the opposite sex in order to promote positive relationships between the sexes. And I think this then says to us that our family life programs at the secondary level must be men and women, or boys and girls, however you prefer to refer to them. I think that there needs to be this kind of interchange between the sexes in a class atmosphere, so that they have an appreciation for how the other person thinks. I think when you have classes of all girls, they're very likely to go off on girl tangents and to romanticize some of the kinds of things. And I think you had classes of all boys, the same kind of thing happens. And that at this age, particularly the secondary school age, you need to have this interchange in regard to what's relevant in male-female relationships. Another sort of thing that they felt was important was to increase self-understanding so that individuals may become self-confident members of their own sex. An appreciation for the fact that you are a woman or that you are a man. An appreciation for the fact that there are many ways to act which is still very good masculinity, and many ways to act which is still very good femininity, and that there isn't a set kind of stereotype that is a threadbare platitude. in either one of the groupings, and to provide whatever factual information the individual desires on all aspects of family life and sex. That final one I thought was kind of interesting, and this one the students developed from the many comments and cards and written statements that students made. That it was one of the things they liked best about the family life course was that you could ask a question and get an answer, and that no question was too foolish, and that the thing that you'd missed in the past could be brought up. In other words, they were saying keep that kind of thing still available in the course, the open door sort of thing. Another important aspect of family life and sex education is this question of the teaching staff. We have people who say, oh, this would be just fine, but where are you going to find good teachers? Are there enough good teachers to teach these young people this particular aspect of life? My feeling is that, of course, there are. There are many good people to do, many good teachers of family life and sex education, as there are good teachers in any other realm. And how do good teachers emerge at any place? How do students do well in school at any point? By family and community reinforcing that individual. It's very difficult for a child to do well in school if his family says, you are not, the dumb school that has you do the dumb things. Or the little child who is quite obstreperous and the mother says, when you go to school, they'll make you sit down and they'll straighten you out. So he looks at that teacher, well, let's just see how she's going to accomplish this fact. And the parents make it difficult for that child to learn in school. And I think what I'm saying here is that our teachers are as good as we're willing to let them be, as we're willing to reinforce education, and as and reinforce the institutions that train them. In other words, you need to have community background, community reinforcement to do anything worthwhile in school. You need to have parent reinforcement for any child to work well in school. And it works as straightforwardly in family life and sex education as it does in any other school subject. Perhaps, though, it's a stronger need here. Someone else might say, well, we should teach the students the fundamentals, not the frill subjects like family life. How often have any of you used your calculus lately, if you took it? Or have you conjugated your Latin verbs today? Have you concerned yourself with your geometry? But did you relate to another human being today? I think this is not a frill. I think this is the basic education.
You have been listening to another in a series of lectures given on the campus of Iowa State University in Ames. Today, Mrs. Dawn Westlake, consultant at the Institute for Educational Research in Chicago, spoke on the topic Sex Education in the High School, and Dr. Claire Maple, professor of mathematics and computer science at Iowa State, discussed the problem of computer privacy. University Lecture is a presentation of Iowa State University Radio.